So one of the things that very rarely gets talked about in entrepreneurship is work-life balance. It almost sounds like a dirty phrase because everybody thinks that entrepreneurs need to be committed 24/7, 365 days a year with nothing else on their minds. And if I was your investor, I guess my first instinct, if I was a young, naive investor, is that's what I'd want too. But then there's nothing worse than an entrepreneur melting down because he or she are getting divorced because they've abandoned their family in exchange for completely giving over their life to work. Or worse, than what happens is when you burn out completely because you've exhausted yourself, and sometimes it takes you months, if not a year or two, to recover. And so understanding what this balance is really important. Let me give you some examples. Being an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley cost me my first marriage. I was completely committed to work, and I remember my ex-wife asking me, what's more important, me or your job? And while I sat there having to think about it for more than 5 minutes, we both kind of realized that it was over. And it was, not because we did anything bad, it's just I couldn't make that commitment. And then fast forward about 10 years later, I now was ready to have kids and wanted to have a family. And this time I made a very different commitment to my wife and to the kids I had. And we actually worked on a series of rules, and I guess I had an advantage as my wife was a Stanford MBA and had done as many startups as I did by that time. But our decision was I would be home by 7 p.m. every night. I would put our kids to have dinner with our kids, put them to bed. My wife and I would have a movie night once a week. We'd do religious holidays and the Sabbath every Friday together with our family, and we'd take a 3-week vacation. And so it wasn't just one big, gee, I'm going to get together with my family and make it all up in one weekend. We actually worked really hard to connect me to the family. And what I didn't realize and only understood years later is while I was going home to have dinner with my kids by 7 p.m., which was early for me, my wife was secretly feeding my children at 5 p.m. so they could actually not be starving to death and cranky when I was coming home for dinner. And my kids and family had a pretty good radar of whether I was still connected or not, or still thinking about work, and they kind of forced me to, the time between I came home and putting them to bed and reading stories was really important for our family.